Well, I just remember coming downtown and seeing the river through all the streets of town. It was a huge flood, and of course we didn't have the MacDowell Dam at that point.
Interior New England, including the southwest part of New Hampshire, the rivers were very full with water from 3 or 4 days of very, very intense rainfall. So when the hurricane came with its 1 to 5 extra inches, that was enough to cause flooding all over New England. I like to call it the storm to which all other New England hurricanes are sooner or later compared.
I was 14 at the time of the 38 hurricane. Downtown was where the disaster struck.
I remember looking out the front bay window of my grandparents' home and looking down on the flood. And then all of a sudden, out the corner of my right eye, I saw flames. And so I turned and looked towards town, and my gosh, it looked as if the whole town was on fire. Now that scared me.
There was a huge amount of rain. It had been raining for quite a while. And we walked across to the porch of the tavern to see the flood, basically, and then realized that the transcript building was on fire. And the winds started coming up very, very strong. It was whipping the fire, and the fire department came down and tried to fight the fire, but the wind was so strong it was blowing the water back at them as they were trying to fight it. And because of the flooding, they couldn't get any nearer than about where the Baptist church was. So the firefighting efforts were kind of useless.
The day of the hurricane, it had rained very, very hard for about 3 or 4 days, and the water in the Nubinusik and Kentucket rivers were really rising very quickly and with a lot of force. It became stronger and stronger.
And the sound of the wind was so loud that we would see trees and telephone poles falling down, but we wouldn't hear them fall. Because the sound of the wind was so loud you didn't hear anything like that. After a bit, my father decided that we should go home. When we got up near our neighbor's house, a tin roof was caught by the wind and came rolling down the street directly at us. So that was quite sensational. But we got by the tin roof and got to our house, and we went to bed, but Mother made us have all our clothes on the bottom of our beds, because when you looked down toward town, the flames were just roaring, and it looked as though the entire town was going to go up in flame, and we thought we probably would have to get out before morning. Fortunately, it did not come anywhere near that.
My mother was a telephone operator. She was in the next room over here where the historical building office was the telephone office at that time. And she stayed there all day and stayed into the night till virtually there was no lines left working, so they all went home. Next door neighbor, George Knight, was a fireman, and he walked my mother home through the trees and the water and what have you.
My father was the Red Cross disaster chairman for Peterborough, so we loaded blankets and pillows and so on in the car, and the whole family came down to take those things to the townhouse because a number of the families that had been flooded out were going to stay in the townhouse that night.
The house I was living in that my grandparents had was a large house, and so the people who came from over the mountains got stuck and because we had a big house, they stayed overnight. And of course, we had no power, and my grandmother found ways to fix up some food for everybody. And so it was like a big party. We had a fire in the fireplace, and that part was fun.
Then I remember just in the next morning when we got up and went to walk down to the street and looked across at Putnam Park and all the trees that were down, and it was just an eerie day. It was like quiet, and the water had gotten so high it went over the walls at Putnam Park, but it went over the wall on the side of the post office. The whole road had been all broken up and left a huge hole, almost the whole width of the road. So cars could not pass over that part of the road to get into town. But I guess you still could walk on the bridge, but that was about all.
But mostly in the 38 hurricane, people on Summer Street and Lower Concord Street, of course, were flooded out, but that was quite normal for them, except the flood waters were higher than usual, but people on Summer Street and Lower Concord always had a problem. But the construction of the MacDowell Dam was a good idea. Made a big difference.
Most of us felt that it was a very good thing, that we needed it, and it certainly has been a huge help.
Controlling the Numinus, it seemed to add quite a bit to it. It behaved pretty well on its own. Then, of course, they built Hopkins and Everett Dam, which protected Concord and downstream. Those flood control dams seem to be a real practical solution to the problems. And when I was in high school, I worked in Lyman's Market, which is where Roy's is. And of course, we used to store all the groceries downstairs. But I don't think it's been an issue since that time. I think if you wonder why Roy's, you have to walk upstairs to get to it, I think you'll find that that floor is just above the flood level of the 38 hurricane. So he made sure that he wasn't going to flood the main floor again.